quiet on the set, please. We're recording.
Good day. I hope you're having a nice day. The day I'm taping this is a very nice, warm day. And we have with us here today Representative Diane Lanpher. How many years have you been in the legislature?
Well, Betty, I've been in there nowhere near as long as you've ever been there, but I hope to maybe get somewhere close to that. This is my ninth year in the legislature, and it's hard to believe. It just feels like it's still like it was just yesterday.
Yeah.
You know, and so.
But you know so much more on how to do things.
You know, I don't realize how much I know until I come out and realize that before we came to the floor with the budget, it was a really good adjustment in our own mindset to remind ourselves that 40% of the people that we would be presenting the budget to on the House floor, they were there 2 years or less. So it's a lot of new people, and I have to remind myself of the things that I do know, and that it is my responsibility to help to inform and bring along the next generation into that slot.
Yeah, it's because you actually the legislature lost a lot of key and top people last year.
Including you. Some very, very tall pillars in the State House retired, which is the normal process.
Yeah.
Again, you know, at about, as you know, about 1/3 of the House members turn over every year.
Yeah.
But we lost the speaker, you know, or didn't lose him. We still know where he is, but you know. But so it's a new speaker, many new chairs. So there's a lot of
Learning.
Yes. At the same time, dealing with a brand new governor, a brand new lieutenant governor, brand new Senate pro tem, and a brand new Speaker of the House, and many chairs. So patience and perseverance is the words of the day.
And you're on what committee?
Oh, I'm currently on House Appropriations. This is my 3rd year on Appropriations Committee. And as you know, I was 6 years on the Transportation Committee.
So those are both money committees.
Correct.
So, yeah. So you know quite a bit about how the money part of the legislature runs. The other, what money is institutions.
Correct.
So that's just 3.
And Ways and Means.
The Ways and Means.
They raise and
they raise what the
we
appropriations. Appropriations said we got this much money to Ways and Means. I gotta find that.
Yes. It's a very good natural tension between what is the capacity in the state for revenues and what is the desire for investments. So that every year, as you know, Vermont balances its budget. I don't think we've ever not balanced our budget. Sometimes it's a struggle to do so, and especially in the last years. I think 3 years ago might have been the toughest, and I believe I was on your show because, as you know, in 2009, when we had that rather dramatic recession, okay, and so much was changing. There was air money and stimulus money from Washington to help to keep states' balance from not toppling over. But that was a short-term place, and many of the investments that were put into place were there to just in the hopes to, let's get us through this. Let's get through this time period. Let's make investments to get through to where we would hope to be making at 5% growth again. So there were a lot of things put into place thinking we would need just short-term fixes. Some of them incorporated, like state employees took a 3% pay reduction. And yep, you remember? Yeah, this was back in 2009 or 10. They took a 3% pay reduction and a 5% at the exempt level for the 2 years. You know, all of these things meant a great deal to balancing the budget because people wanted to chip in to do their part to get through it. But about 2015, the recovery was coming, but not anywhere near as fast or as high as we hoped to be. And realizing right around the 15th that it was this, where we were was where we were going to be for quite a while.
Yeah.
And so we needed to take some of the more dramatic steps of adjusting to a new normal.
Yeah.
And that was the hardest part.
Yeah.
At the same time that when employees had taken a 3% pay reduction that was due to expire and their new contract, so it would be a rather big advancement. But we managed to navigate. We navigated through it.
We always do. And people say, oh, we've got not enough money. We're $17 million behind, and we're $20 million behind. But we're not 20 million or 17 million behind on the day of June when the thing ends.
Right.
We fix it in January.
Yes.
So that we aren't.
That's the very first bill, you're right. The very first thing we do is it's called budget adjustment, the BAA.
Yeah.
So it's taking a look at, all right, we're 6 months into the budget that was created and started July 1. Where are we out of balance? Where are we running hot? Where are we saving? Where can we readjust those balances within state government? So that's the very first thing we do. Sometimes that can be pretty dramatic, or it feels like it, but given the fact that we have this year's $5.8 billion budget, even small, it's a lot of money when a particular program is a couple of $1 million, but in the overall scheme, the adjustment is pretty right on. But
and some of the committees and groups, and departments don't actually use all of the money they were given.
Right.
So you can use that money to help fit the deficit somewhere else.
Exactly, and that's what readjustment or budget adjustment is all about. When the very beginnings of the healthcare bill, there was no foundation to be able to do any good analysis or predicting what was going to happen. So we have a fabulous team of staff in Montpelier, the Joint Fiscal Office and our Legislative Council, who
the
do
joint fiscal is the ones that does money,
correct.
and then the legislative is the ones that write the laws.
So we might come up with an idea that says, well, what if we did this? What would be the financial impacts in the state? Or how could we predict what this would cost? And staff will do an analysis. Sometimes you'll see us because we'll do that over the summer because it's not something that can be just done over a weekend or 3 days. Sometimes it really takes some more in-depth process, and sometimes it actually requires hiring a third-party contractor or somebody to actually join with them to get some good numbers. But when we first rolled out the healthcare, not knowing, not having a baseline or an experience level, what was predicted to happen was watched carefully and became very volatile as to how it was actually occurring in real time. And what we were going to have to do to adjust it. So some of the experience of what we thought it was going to cost and how many people came in the door was not the same, and therefore we had to adjust up. So that was a pretty dramatic up in time. But we look at the data where expenses may be overall in a particular area up, but if you drill down just a couple of levels below it, you might see that the actual person is using less health care, but there's more people in the system. So overall, it's costing more, but if you look a little deeper, and that's what we do in the committee, is we're tasked with digging deeper, and there seems like there's never, ever enough time to actually be able to get into everything that you want to, which is one of the reasons why I believe on a previous show, we were very happy to put into, on the first time ever in a budget bill, to have intent language. We said, this is our budget, this is what we're doing this year, but here's where we'd like to go in the future. We would like to.
That's right.
We would like to be able to expend less than 100% of the revenue that was predicted. So if the forecasting, let's just say if it's forecasted to bring in $1 million, but we only bring in, 999,000, we don't want to budget to the full extent of the forecast. Let's see if we can budget a little bit less, because it helps with the volatility at budget adjustment time. Mm-hmm. And that was achieved the year before. We kept $1.2 million unspent on, sometimes we, in the House, because all money bills start in the House and go to the Senate. So I'll let you know. Well, I shouldn't say, it's not really a secret, but we might leave $1.2 million in the bottom line for future, and then we get concerned that it will evaporate in the Senate. And then, so sometimes
but
we
then
would.
You have a committee of conference, so you can fix that out.
Sometimes if we would prefer to actually maybe allocate to places we choose. Mm-hmm. But it's been a great 3 years. We're starting to see some real stability, and I'm very, very happy to say to your listeners that this budget, I don't know if you know how important it is to get a vote off the floor, but to get a vote off the floor of 143 to 1 on a budget is unthinkable.
Yeah, on a budget, yes.
Unbelievable. So here's how it played out, though. We had overall in Vermont, our revenues are up. People say, "Oh, we're not doing so well." Well, we're doing fine. Our revenues were up 3.7%.
Wow.
Not the 5% that maybe we needed to sustain the growth that we were on, path we were on, but 3.7% increase in revenues. That is a good thing for Vermont. And our state's
Does that come from tourism, some of
all areas, income, tourism, meals and I was going to say Meals on Wheels tax, but that's not right. Rooms and meals.
Rooms and meals.
All the indicators are there. So 3.7% revenue increase. There are many sectors, though, in our Vermont that are not doing as well as that, and that we have to be sensitive to, as far as I believe our families have a lot of stressors. They haven't had the growth over the last 20 years that would make their life much more comfortable to live and feel assured, so we can keep addressing that. The other is our gross state product, I always get that wrong, grew at 2%. All right. So 3.7% revenue, 2% in our state gross product, and we kept our budget this year, its overall growth, down to 1%. So if revenues grew at 3.7, the budget grew at 1%. That is holding our state's resources to a very confined space. Now, this made some people very, very happy in what they were looking for. But our reasoning for this, a lot of it is to keep in line what you heard me say about the alligator's mouth, to keep our growth in line with our spending. But, and here's the big but, we don't know what the federal budget impacts are going to be on Vermont. And I've seen it already in this budget where vocational rehab had a reduction of a reallocation, not the regular federal, but a reallocation that they had been receiving for the past 9 years in a row. So it became sort of, you would think it was going to be there. This year, it was not there. It's about a 30% reduction in vocational rehab.
Oh, wow.
And it's going to, it is very important and very concerning as I read these reports, knowing that it will be August or next fall when this budget rolls out, that will be a very missing component in that very important area of state government, supports around people with disabilities for preparation for work.
This goes along with the thing that people want that. People also want this. People also want that. And so what you're trying to do is to give to the people something that they want, but it costs money.
Yes.
And it costs taxes, which they don't want.
Right.
So it's
Right.
hard to, I mean, they all want clean water.
Yeah.
Take a simple, not a simple, but a simple understanding. They want water. They want clean Lake Champlain
Yeah.
and all that. But we don't have the money for it unless we tax. They don't want to be taxed. So there's this thing, we'll give you some, we'll give you some, we'll give you some.
That's the tension that
Yeah.
keeps us in that sort of sweet spot, so to speak.
Yeah.
So on that topic, Betty, I can say that you have probably done a few shows on the lake. Last summer, we tasked the tax department with the treasurer's office, with ANR, and with the agriculture, the Agency of Agriculture. We said to the 4 groups, please go out, find out what do we need to do to be compliant with the TMDL, which is in itself is not cleaning up the lake.
TDML.
Total daily maximum load. Vermont was put on a diet of what we can put into the lake for phosphorus. And we have been told we must reduce it by 34% over the next 20 years.
Because we did pass laws on no phosphorus in your washing machine water and
Yes.
stuff.
Yes, you were very instrumental in a lot. And fertilizer on the lawn.
Yeah.
And a lot of first steps that begin it. But as you know, Vermont was, or actually the EPA was sued for not holding Vermont's feet to the fire for what it was supposed to be doing to reduce our phosphorus load to the lake. We're a very small state, but a very, very large part of Vermont is a part of the basin that feeds the lake. And I'll often get a question, well, what is New York doing?
Yeah.
Well, what is Quebec doing? Well, they're a big state, but they have a much smaller part that actually feeds into the lake. They have the Adirondacks, doesn't have the population base or the industry, and the forestry actually holds it back. So their contribution level is much smaller than Vermont's. And however, their tax base is a lot larger. But so
And Quebec helps
yes,
too.
they do, and they meet regularly, and they all have their goals. So when we talk about cleaning up the lake, the one thing that is important to remember is it's not what I would call cleaning up the lake. There's a lot of things, and as you know, we could do a whole show on the sewage spillage and runoff. How about pharmaceuticals in the lake? Those are not included. Right now, the TMDL is all about reducing phosphorus by 34%. And that alone, Betty, is for the 20-year prediction after the group had finished their summer work, is $2.56 billion over 20 years for Vermont. And right now, we already make a lot of great investments, like you had mentioned, since we've taken a lot of steps. So if we take a look at what we already invest in and what we need to do, the gap between those two is $1.3 billion over the next 20 years, just to get phosphorus down 34%.
Without doing all the medical,
Right.
people should not flush the toilet
Right.
with the medicine, the leftover
Right.
medicine. A lot of people
This
do
is-
that. That's bad business.
Yes,
It goes for the fish.
I have been known to do it myself
Yes,
until I've learned,
Yeah.
and now take them back to your pharmacy or to the state police if there's any leftover medication. But that's also a good thing. So we have this year in the capital bill the beginnings of investments into the TMDL piece of that 20-year plan. But it's only for the next 2 years of using what we have in Vermont with some bonding capacity to start that off without creating new revenue, all right? The current governor did not want to raise taxes or fees. Nobody really does.
No.
Nobody does. So we could use some of our bonding. But what I would really like to see happen is to not leave Montpelier next session, at the end of the biennium, without the 20-year plan for the funding, the long-term investment funding source that's dedicated to our lake. And there's been many recommendations by the treasurer and others as to how to get there. So it's probably won't pass this year, but the conversations have begun. So it would be my hope that we do not leave here next year. I think it would be a false sense that we've accomplished it, which we haven't. We just began the 2-year piece of it. We still have the 18 years.
And you have committees that can get some of the information on this point and some issues on that point. And sometimes there are legislators in that, and sometimes there aren't.
Yeah, I can say that this year, and you've been there for the beginning of it, about 3-4 years ago, there was a big seismic shift in thinking about how we do our budgeting process. And that included much more input from the committees of jurisdiction. Mm-hmm. And by that I mean, I know that you know, but for your listeners, if you're on the Ag Committee, or you're on Human Services Committee, or you're on Fish, Wildlife, and Water Resources Committee, those are the committees of jurisdiction on those topics. They have typically 11 members, sometimes smaller, but 11 members who dig deep into that particular jurisdiction. And it is important, if we're looking at the ag budget, the Agency of Agriculture's budget, which by the way this year is a new one for me, so I had to learn a whole new topic area, but that we involve them, that I'm not making cuts or suggestions for cuts from an area from just looking at a report. It is new thinking the last 4 years to say to the Ag Committee, here's your budget. I want your input on what is the priorities to fund.
That's just sort of yes.
And that has been a very kind of uncomfortable conversation for some committees to have to start to think in those terms.
Yeah.
What are the priorities of the programs within my jurisdiction, and how do I structure the money that we might have available to actually apply it to its best use? So
yeah, like I was on judiciary, and that includes the courts.
Yes.
How much is the courts going to cost us? How much time should they stay open? How many judges do we need? And that all goes back to you.
Correct.
So when you sent us that, we weren't quite ready for it because it was new.
It was new.
So, but after you do it a year or 2 or 3 or 4, the committee learns.
Yes.
And learns what's going on and how to do it, and they come up with better answers than they did the first year.
Yes. So we had a deadline of March 1st. Remember, we don't get the budget till about January 20th. So it's really the month of February that we're working on it hard in all the committees. So March 1st, we call them the letters back from the committees of jurisdiction. Mm-hmm. So if we're going to ask and want that all-in approach in the House, which this year was phenomenally the next level, they're ready to start. Like you said, they've been doing it a couple of years now, and they're ready to chip into that process and come into our room and actually say, oh, I think I found this, or I believe we can do this and do this better. And to be actually thrilled. They really feel the energy around participating, which may have a lot to do with 143 to 1 vote. Yeah. By the time we're done with this process, it has involved every committee, including ours, and 7 public hearings for the public in the process. And
Republicans and Democrats, independents, and people who say
progressives.
Yeah.
So it makes it for a little more complicated for us to knit it all in, as you know, like there's a lot of cooks in the kitchen, because when you invite them in, you have to take great respect for what they're contributing, and making sure that that they know that, and that their voice is heard, and that their recommendations are weighed out well. Now, some committees, as new chairs are more accustomed to working on it, and others not as much yet.
Like transportation and institutions with our money committees.
Yeah, yes, and so there was a lot of looking what I call over the lane this year, because we have general fund, which is funded in a specific way, transportation fund, gas tax and DMV fees, and education fund, property tax, and then we also contribute. General fund contributes to the education fund with a formula at about $314 million a year. So sometimes when any one of, I call them the lanes, when any one of these lanes maybe is running a little short or feeling stressed, they start looking over at their partner and thinking, oh, they're doing well. And that was a little bit with what happened with the governor this year in the original budget, which made it a little more difficult, is there was a lot of desire by some to take a look at the education fund and use it to pay for what is typically general fund expenses.
Ooh.
Yes, which is, we know, that is a direct property tax. So we waited till town meeting to see if the governor's call to school boards to level fund, and not level fund and open up the teacher's contract so that the property taxpayers could save, but because there was a very good idea. I mean, I liked what he wanted to do with it, but not the circumstances under which to do it, which was to put it on property taxes to make some investments in childcare and higher ed, which I still wish we could do more of.
Yeah,
But
childcare is so important. Young child, like 2, 3, and 4-year-olds. I was at a meeting, and my grandchildren were 2, and they were teaching these 2-year-olds. They'd only been in the place about a week or 2. Not one of them could say a word, but my grandchildren could talk quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
By the time they were 3 years old, the group had worked with them and they were up to par.
Yeah.
But if they wouldn't have this help in the 2, 3, and 4 years, they go into 5th grade. They know how to speak and do things, but they don't know what the other.
And they slip farther and farther behind with every year.
This way they get caught up.
I agree. I know that we're probably running short on time, but there was some good things we invested in this year. There was some tough choices to be made to keep that growth down, but we did manage on the last day to be able to make a little bit more investment in working lands, which both we heard from the public and others is an important investment in Vermont's industry. And I look forward to coming back again, Betty, if you'll have me to talk about a few other bills there's a public pension option that's under consideration, either myself or others to talk about. And I've got an after-school bill that I'd love to talk about at some point.
Oh, well, I can always use somebody to come. So I guess we got about another minute or half a minute. Is there something in particular you would like to?
Well,
you're working hard.
Well, and this is going to sound maybe not strange, but we've already started on the budget 2019. 2 days after the budget passed, we took a moment, slept in, did the laundry. Okay, now we're back at it. We're ready to start on keeping the momentum that we have and applying it right now. So the Appropriations Committee, while the Senate is working on the bill, in between right now, we've already starting to take testimony on how we can make the 2019 budget better and for everybody.
Well, thank you for coming, and this was great.
You're welcome,
really
Betty.
great.
It's so good to see you.
And thank you for listening and being with us. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.